We're now at the final portion of our interactive presentation where we will talk about what to do after a lecture. And I'm also going to cover a little bit about getting a system. So let's get started with this portion. What do you do after taking notes? This is actually far more important than actually taking the notes themselves, because you have access usually to the information a professor gives you, sometimes not. But what you do after the note-taking system is really related to what we know about brain research. And another important element to think about is that everything you do after you take notes is also what you do before you take a test. So the after portion of note-taking is actually doing double duty for you. So here are the things to start with. First of all, review your notes within 24 hours. This is based on multiple studies that have to do with memory. We remember things better if we review them within a 24-hour period. And part of that has to do with current brain research sleep studies about how our brain processes information and retains it into long-term memory if we review it within a 24-hour period. So put that into your calendar to review your notes before you go to bed at night. You need to edit your notes, and that can be done while you review them. That is, if you left blank spaces because you didn't get everything, edit them. Go back and check the dates and fill in the information that you may have missed. Write words in the margins, keywords, to help you access the information later and to help you visually remember where you have written it down. Use the words to recite things. So as you are writing those keywords into the left side margin of your Cornell notes, should you choose to use that type of system, recite it. And again, you're opening more pathways to the brain when you recite things out loud. The key element here is to do something with your notes, not just write them, put them in a notebook, carry them to the next class, open up to the next page. You got to do something with them. For example, you have to make maps of them. Now, you should know how to do maps by now. There's folded paper techniques, there's note cards, there's charts, there's outlines. Note cards you've done before, where you write maybe a term on one side and the definition or an example on the other. It can be used with vocabulary words, as you've been doing for my class, but not just vocabulary words. Here are some examples of how things are done. This is information about a book. It's not a vocabulary card. Here are several vocabulary terms added to note cards, and on the back would be the source that it came from. You can also use charts, and this is good for different types of notes, where it's not really a map unless you're thinking of these in terms of categories, and then it is sort of like a tree map. Really good for history type classes. You can use outlines with your notes. Once you write things down, as the lecture goes on, it might be hard to determine what's a sub-detail, a detail, or a main idea. But once you're done with the notes, you can then rewrite them into a format that makes sense to you using the structure like an outline. You can use a folded paper technique, where you fold a piece of paper. And we'll talk about that in the next class. A key element to all of note-taking is to get yourself some kind of a system. Maybe you have one notebook for different subjects. Maybe you have different dividers that you use within that notebook. Maybe you use 3 different notebooks. The point is to do it right the first time. So get your supplies before school starts and get them organized. In this situation, here's a great example of how you can use the same notebook, but maybe you would use portion of it for your psychology textbook when you are taking notes on the textbook. And then when you go to the lecture, you've got it right with you. You take notes on the lecture in a separate area. You could do the same with math or any subject. Another option is to actually get 3 different notebooks, where one is the lecture, one is for the text, and then one is for you to compile that information. You would bring the lecture notebook to class, The textbook notebook you might not have to bring to class. Maybe you leave it at home with your textbook. But then this review material is what stays at home, and it is a way for you to synthesize the information, where you put the lecture material and the textbook material in one place. And these are great because you can use them in your professional life. You can then go back to this set of notes, especially if you're doing a subject that's in your field. That can be very useful. Hopefully this was helpful on note-taking. You have further instructions on Canvas to get you prepared for the next face-to-face class if you're a hybrid student, or to prepare for what's next if you are an online student.